Okay, thank you, Chris. Welcome Camden Rotarians and guests to the 8th presentation in our monthly series on economic and workforce development. This series is part of our initiative to learn about our region's economy. We hope to use what we learn to generate collaboration among leaders in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Our goal is to have a positive impact on the economic vitality and life quality in the communities we serve. We are pleased to have Joe Cloutier speaking to us today. Joe is a Realty Resources Group co-founder and is going to talk to us about the opportunities and challenges when considering housing for diverse income levels. Born in Maine, Joe began clamming and lobstering at the age of 8. After graduating from the University of Maine, he studied law at Boston College and practiced law before devoting his career to affordable housing. Joe and his wife, Linda, developed their first affordable housing project in 1976. Since then, they have created numerous low-income and workforce housing communities in New England and currently have 25 projects underway. During Joe's presentation, please post questions by clicking on the chat button at the bottom of the screen and enter your question. We will present questions to Joe in the order in which they are posted. Welcome, Joe. The screen is yours.
Thanks, Rich. As Rich said, I'm a recovering lawyer. That's like a recovering alcoholic. I'm still a lawyer, but I don't practice anymore, and I've devoted full time to affordable housing around New England. Fundamental question that communities face is really affordable housing needed in the community. I 100% unequivocally know and believe that it is. Diversity is critically important in all levels: economic, educational, housing, ethnicity, you name it. It makes a stronger community. But that opinion isn't universally held at all. Years ago, I was chairman of Camden's Affordable Housing Organization, and we built 15, 20 houses in Camden by having the town convey tax-acquired property to a 501c3 that I set up, and we developed housing. Very proud of that. I was down at the select board meeting arguing about proposing something for affordable housing. When I walked out, a lady said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "Mr. Cloutier, we don't need those people in town." I looked at her and I said, "Well, ma'am, I think you probably have a very nice home. And if it catches on fire, the fire department volunteers are going to have to drive many, many miles to come and put your fire out. And if you get sick and go to the emergency room, the nurses, setup crew, and assistants are going to have to drive many, many miles to care for you and possibly save your life. So I know that those people are needed in our community. Have a nice day." But that opinion surfaces many, many times in developing affordable housing. Everyone's heard of NIMBYs, not in my backyard. I developed properties over in Vermont where there are NOPEs, not on the planet Earth. We had some projects over there where they refused to give me water. I had an office in Burlington, and I got a call from my gal who ran that office and said, "Joe, you have to come over for a meeting." And we had all of our money, all of our approvals, state and federal, for an affordable housing project in Bradford, Vermont. So I went over and had this meeting, 7-hour drive one way, and met with the board of the local quasi-municipal water association. And he said, "Mr. Cloutier, this is a family project, right?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And so he said, "Well," he said, "we don't have to give you water." And I said, "You don't?" He said, "No, we're a quasi-municipal." I said, "Oh, okay." And he says, "We don't have to give you water. And if it was an elderly project, we'd feel a lot better about it." And I said, it's not an elderly project. There's a dramatic need for affordable housing in this community. These are apartments, workforce housing." And so he said, "Well, okay, the vote's Monday night." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Are you going to come over for the vote?" And I said, "No, I'm going to stay in Maine. I'm going to travel 7 hours back, and I'm going to stay in Maine. But I'll tell you what's going to happen Tuesday morning." And he said, "What's going to happen Tuesday morning?" I said, I'm going to sue you in federal district court in Burlington. And after another year or two of delay and waiting, and me spending $75,000, and the town and you spending $75,000, I'm going to get my approvals. And that's exactly what happened. And I had another issue over in Vermont I won't go into, but after that that reaction to affordable housing, I left the Green Mountain State alone, and I haven't been back. There are things a community can do to really help affordable housing. And I think building a substantial coalition that's actively engaged in affordable housing is a very important first step. And this would be a coalition not of the usual affordable housing groups like Habitat, Homeless Coalition, or co-housing groups, but it would involve the Rotary, it would involve the Chamber of Commerce, it would involve the home builders, because they all have a stake in seeing affordable workforce housing built in their community. Obviously, for the businesses, these homes are their workers' housing, and it's critically important. Home builders, we need home builders to build this housing. So I propose for Camden and Rockport that a real solid coalition be put together, Rotarians included, to advocate for affordable housing and some possible changes. I developed a project down in Hyannis years ago, and it was one of the first affordable housing, workforce housing projects in Hyannis. And there was a group that got together. We don't want this. So I went to the hotels and the restaurants. I traveled around, and they showed up, and they changed the planning board's mind. They said, look, we don't have any housing for workers. We need this housing, and it passed. Well, Camden needs this housing. Rockport needs this housing. So one of the things that we could do in our town is develop an affordable housing overlay zone. I've used it out of state, in communities out of state, but it's a mobile zone that has higher densities for the housing, because you can't do much about the price of land. And as everyone knows, it's incredibly expensive. But by getting higher densities than are typically allowed in the zoning ordinance, that helps affordable housing. Less parking. We have many senior housing projects where the parking lot, which we were required to build because of zoning ordinances, is 3/4 empty. It just sits there. Smaller roads could be included in that zone. It could be placed over single family zones. It could involve a TIF, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but it also would be a zone where there are zero charges for connection fees, sewer permits, impact fees. And that would be something that I think Camden and Rockport and many communities should do. You can do contract zoning for affordable housing, but that is laborious. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money getting lawyers and engineers involved, whereas an affordable housing overlay zone would really be something that could work very easily and much less expensively than currently that we have. Our expertise has been, although we've done some subdivisions in the past, our expertise has been in apartments. And I think we developed 80 or 100 apartment projects over the 40-something years that I've been involved in this business. And we currently manage 80-something projects around England. But because of the need for workforce housing, and because of the challenges that we face in building workforce housing, homeownership, we decided to get out of our wheelhouse just a little bit and develop potentially a couple of subdivisions that would be homeownership workforce housing. I'm not going to get into the particulars because there are some other very able applicants for Sagamore Farm, but I'm just going to talk about some of the tools that we are potentially going to use. Main State Housing Authority has a subdivision program available to anyone that is basically unused. It has been used by a couple of nonprofits for very, very small projects around the state, but it basically is a subdivision program where you can borrow up to $400,000 and you can develop up to 20 homes. But there are limits on incomes, and in Camden, I think the income limit is 76,000 for a family of two and a little bit over 80,000 for a family of four. So that you have to target that income level and sell to a person under those income levels. And if you develop the program using that subdivision program, it's a grant. It turns into a grant. So you can use that, and the subdivision program can be used for infrastructure, roads, soft costs, engineering, and architects. But if you are successful in developing under those criteria, then it becomes a grant, and you can use that 400,000 to reduce the cost of the homes for the buyers. So we plan on using that whenever and wherever we do a subdivision for workforce housing. But here's the trick. In Camden, in order to use the subdivision program, you have to deliver the house for $220,000 all in. That's land, infrastructure, landscaping, including the cost of the house. So we're building right now a senior project up in Belfast, and we went to the builder that's building it, and we have an architect that's designed the plans. So we vetted it with him, and he said, there's no way I can ever come close to doing that. In other words, building the house for what we needed. We vetted it with a couple of other local contractors, same response. There's no way that we can ever deliver that house for what we need. What's interesting is the median listing price for homes in Camden is $429,000. Median income in Camden is $64,000. So to deliver a house, and we're targeting 40 to 80% of median income. That's where we're trying to get the home to sell to 40 to 80% of median income is an incredible challenge. So we're pretty persistent. So I went to manufactured housing organizations up in Canada. I used to be involved in the modular housing business years and years ago. And typically, Canadian manufacturers could beat any price in the US, even main modular housing manufacturers. But as everyone knows, there's a tremendous demand for materials. I think they're up 15%, the increase in 15% over last year for the cost of building materials. And there's a tariff between Canada and the United States, which the Biden administration has reduced down from 20 to 9, but it's still out of reach for most of the materials that we need. But I found a modular housing manufacturer in Maine that if we build a significant number of houses, like 20, they can meet the pricing that we need to deliver those houses in Camden and in another subdivision we're planning down in Bath. Incidentally, Bath, Saginaw County desperately needs housing. Bath Iron Works is hiring. They can't find housing. It's a monstrous problem. And we went to the planning board for sketch plan review, and guess what? The neighborhood next to us got organized and went to the planning board and the city officials and said, we don't want this housing. So there's probably a nope group down in Bath. So we just decided to move the housing project away from them. We've got enough land. So rather than fight with them, which we could win with enough lawyer fees and engineering fees, we'd win it in a couple of years. But we're hoping that by moving the project away from them, we've taken the bullets out of the gun. So we'll see how that goes. A couple of months ago, I saw on one of my news feeds about 3D printed concrete houses. So I dug into it, and the company that built this concrete 3D printed house over in New York said they had 10,000 requests for information. And I have a friend in Manchester, England, who's one of the world's foremost experts in 3D technology, and he's agreed to vet the technology with me. Our company has been approved, and I've signed an NDA to get the information about this 3D printing technology. So the way it generally would work is you pour your foundation and all of your walls with concrete, and it could be done 10 times faster than building a stick-built house, and maybe 50, depending on where you are. We haven't run the pro formas yet, but maybe 50 to 60% less cost than building the walls with stick built, with wood and stick built. Obviously, your roof and all of your framing on your roof would have to be built out of wood, and we're thinking about panelizing, modularizing that. To try to get a template so we can do affordable housing in various communities much more affordable than currently is being done. The machine is a 7-figure purchase price. So my controller choked when I said we may be buying this machine, but we're a long way from it at this point, but it really is very, very exciting to us, especially for if it goes 2 stories, we can build some of our apartment buildings, which are typically 2 stories with this technology. I've raced through a complex project very quickly. I'm happy to take questions from anyone, and thanks for your time.
Okay, Joe, the first question we have is from Stephanie Smith that says there is a group forming that is interested in a community land trust for the mid-coast. Can you speak to this method of being able to create housing?
Yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with community land trust, especially in Vermont, not so much here in Maine, but there's mutuality in working with Habitat, hypothetically our company or other affordable housing developers with the land trusts. I think there's a great deal of synergy between the 2 concepts, and I'd invite them to join this coalition or group that I've suggested that needs to be formed here in the mid-coast.
Thank you, Joe. Next question is from Diane Lebson. Joe, what can our Rotary Club do to help change people's negative perceptions about affordable housing? How do you see our club being helpful in this conversation to help our neighbors?
Join the coalition if there is one formed, and I'm going to do everything I can to form that coalition, and then maybe there's an educational process. I haven't gotten to the end of the thought process on this, but maybe there's an education process that we can all do to change people's minds. I've been in this business a long time, and most of the opposition comes from a misunderstanding of the housing we're proposing. First of all, you can't get over the problem if you're locating next to a neighborhood who doesn't want you. You can't, and it's typical NIMBYism or NOPEs. There's no way to fight that except have this overlay zone where you're entitled to put that housing next to them. But I think education and looking at what's been done in town, and Camden's got some affordable housing anyway, many apartments. I've got some that have good members of the community, well managed, well run, and they serve a tremendous purpose, good purpose in the community. So that'd be my response, I guess.
Okay, Joe, from Chip Holmes, any chance of lobbying Maine Housing for higher caps or a range of caps on sale pricing?
I've worked with Misha for going on 50 years. Yes, it's certainly appropriate to lobby. For example, that $220,000 is just for Knox and Waldo County. If you go down to Bath, it goes to $260,000. $40,000 when you're building an affordable house is a big amount of money. So this coalition could hypothetically lobby Misha to raise limits here in Knox and Waldo County, especially where land costs are extraordinarily high up here compared to Bath. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to lobby and it doesn't hurt to talk, but I'm just a developer. We do talk to them and we do advocate, and we work within the rails, and we're pretty successful at working within the rails of their programs. But yeah, we ought to get together and lobby not only Misha, but Vicky Dudera is very active in that area. Politics makes a difference, and voters make a difference. So yeah, we absolutely should do that.
Thank you, Joe. Another one from Diane Lebson. Just trying to flesh out details on the coalition. You talked briefly about it, but do you see what do you see as its charge, and who would be involved, and who would take the lead, et cetera?
The coalition would be diverse. And as I said, it would involve Rotarians, Chamber of Commerce, home builders, as well as the folks who are every day involved in housing, such as Habitat, the Homeless Coalition, and any other businesses in town that could benefit from workforce housing, home ownership. I'd need to sit down with a group and think it through and talk to them. Maybe you form a 501c3 that would be an advocacy group, especially focused on affordable housing, because there are potentially grants that that group could get, as well as make a big political difference up in Augusta with our representatives and Maine State Housing Authority.
Okay, from Joan Faup. Are there different terms for low cost rental housing or bought housing that working people buy? I mean, what are the different, are there some terms that are more acceptable or than other terms?
We don't use low income. I banished it from the company years ago. We use affordable housing. Now, we do have housing that is very, very, as a practical matter, low income. And those are well managed, as well as many other managers around the state do a good job. But affordability really goes from 40% of median up to 100% of median. And there are different ranges of housing that you can do within those parameters. We have always looked at we've always tried to do housing where we're meeting the most need, the broadest need, and the most economic need. But there's many levels, many levels. And frankly, building affordable housing with market housing is probably the best way to go, because you're interspersing affordable housing within a community, and no one is being singled out as, well, that's the low income or the the affordable housing. So it takes yeah, there's a way to do it, and I think can be done.
Thanks. This is from Pamela Corcoran. Can you share your thoughts about increasing affordable senior housing in our area?
Oh, sure. Affordable senior housing is desperately needed, growing need every year. We've done a lot of it. The problem with affordable senior rental housing is the resources are very, very limited. I've been doing this, since '76, and there used to be many, many more resources available in the '70s and '80s than there are now. Typically, rental housing is funded through low-income housing tax credits. That's what they call it. There's state tax credits as well today, but those resources are finite, and they're very, very limited, and there's big competition for those tax credits. So we're involved in every year going after projects with those credits. A lot of nonprofits, especially out of Portland, are involved in going after those credits, but they're finite. We ought to advocate more resources going to senior housing. But it's an uphill battle. It's just an uphill battle to get Washington to advocate more resources. George Mitchell, a federal judge, our former senator, was the biggest advocate for affordable housing. And Maine used to get $35 or $40 million of rural development. We used to call it farmers' home housing a year. And farmers' home programs doesn't have any housing program anymore. There's no new rural development housing. So advocacy is really important to get this done.
Okay, Joe, just real quickly, we have a number of people asking how to get in contact with you. What's the best way to get in contact with you after this meeting?
I get so many emails. I'm reluctant, but I stepped into it. So Cloutier at realtyresourcesgroup.com.
So Cloutier at
realtyresourcesgroup.com. Apologize for the length.
Okay. And then from John Goss, years ago, a local builder, Sonny Goodwin, used a concrete insulation interlocking system to build workforce housing that looks and feels like traditional wood construction. Is this anything like the 3D printed construction you are considering?
Fundamentally, I know Sonny and respected him. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. The end result is the same, but the 3D printing does it in a tenth of the time and a fraction of the cost. That's the difference. But it would look exactly like some of the houses that Sonny built. I was talking with another group, and they said, making cement puts tremendous amount of CO2 in the air. And I said, well, I didn't know that. Well, a ton of cement causes 980 kilograms of CO2 to be put into the atmosphere. That's 2,000 pounds. So I've been studying low CO2 concrete for the last couple of days to try to figure out, there is concrete that you can get that doesn't produce that much CO2, but it's just part of the journey that we're going through right now in our company.
Great. This is actually for me, Joe. Just in terms of your involvement with the banks and mortgages for these, do they have how do you work with them in terms of what might be available for people to finance these low or affordable housing?
Misha has the first-time homebuyer program that if you qualify, basically it's a interest rate is 3.4% 30 years, on a $220,000 house, it's about $1,000 a month. Now, banks have Community Reinvestment Act credits that they need. We've done deals directly for affordable housing with Camden National. We're doing a deal directly with Machias Savings right now. So banks are incentivized to work with affordable housing. You just have to have the right designed vehicle that meets their parameters, but the banks are incentivized to do it. And if we did anything here in Camden, we would go to all the banks to, and we will down Bath, we'd go to all the banks to see what we could put together for finance vehicles.
Great, thank you.
Couple of comments, Joe, and then I have a question from Susan. I strongly support Joe's suggestion to put together a coalition on this issue that would include all interests and elements of our Mid-Coast community. As a board member of the Knox County Homeless Coalition, I can say this is our #1 problem. I think it would be wonderful if the Rotary Club takes a leadership role in this effort. That's from Susan, one of our members. Then from Stephanie Smith, just as an aside on naming housing, interesting that Bath Housing Authority Director uses the term stable housing. So your experience with Bath for the stable housing is
that's a good housing authority. We're working with them on our project, but that's a wonderful housing authority. They don't really develop, they work with developers. So they'll be a partner of ours in Bath, depending on what we do down there.
And Joe, I have a question. We talk in terms of developments where you're going to build 15, 20 houses in a plot of ground. Is it possible to conceive a project where maybe you have 20 homes, but they're interspersed around a community on a set of lots that are somehow or is that just almost impossible to imagine happening?
No, not impossible at all. Not impossible at all. More difficult only because you're dealing with many lots and zoning on many lots as opposed to one, but not impossible at all. One of the challenges, if we use the Maine State Housing Authority subdivision program, is how would that work? Because $400,000, if you're building 20 homes is a lot of money. That's $20,000 a house. So it's a lot of money to bring down the cost of the housing. But one of the challenges is how would that work with Misha's subdivision program and first time home buyer program? But we're going to be talking to him. We're going to be talking to Misha about exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that might be a way you think about a coalition, that if you've got a group of people that in Rockport, Camden, that just focus on how can we find X number of lots, 10, 12, whatever the number is, the number's not magic, but find a number of lots that would be acceptable to this approach. And then you're going to build 10 or 15, 20 homes, but they just happen to be on very dispersed out throughout the community, interjected within other homes.
It's a good idea, Rich. It's hypothetically doable, but you gotta put the arrow through different targets as you go down toward the target. But it's doable. It's doable. And frankly, rather than building a big number of affordable housing together, I think it's a better idea if you can do it to intersperse in different neighborhoods and different lots.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anybody else have a question? We're running out here on the chat board here. I think if Joe, as far as this coalition, and you've named them, but what's the order of priority of things that a coalition that would be put together? What's the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you would focus on as you started this coalition, and what would you try to attack? Is it zoning? Is it overlays? Is it what is it?
Number 1 is to work with the town on an affordable housing overlay zone. That's the vehicle that will reduce land costs, reduce construction costs, reduce permitting issues. That's to me the number one vehicle, is to get a device that can float around where appropriate, and focus on affordable housing. Second, I think, is working with our congressional delegation, and I think they're very receptive, to talk to them about making some changes at Main State Housing Authority, because that's the 800-pound gorilla, and getting some changes in the subdivision program, more resources. Although Misha's somewhat limited in what they can do, but I found them to be receptive as anytime they can. I found them to be receptive within limits. And then finally, going to Washington and talking to our national Senate and House leaders about more resources for affordable housing in general. That hasn't been done since the 70s and 80s. There's not a big, powerful lobby in Washington for affordable housing. I don't know why.
This is from Jeremy Martin. From your perspective, why does the state not focus on affordable housing for families? We hear so much about tax credit for senior housing. What about families?
Well, there are tax credits for family housing. Absolutely, tax credits for family housing, and I think there's a big need for it and a priority for it. From a developer's point of view, it's much easier to do senior housing and get approvals for senior housing than it is for workforce housing. We built many affordable family housing projects. But as I said, the NIMBYs and the NOPEs are the first thing that hits you. And you'd think that attitudes would change over time. They haven't. And Bath's the best example of it. They haven't changed.
Real quick, what's a zoning overlay zone as opposed to contract zone? What's there? Jerry maybe can step in here too and answer this one. But what's the difference between an overlay zone and a contract zone?
From my point of view, having used it, a contract zone deals with one particular project. An overlay zone is already developed, so that the zoning is there, and it's gone through vetting, and it's already there, and it can be used in any zone where physically and from an engineering point of view, it's acceptable. That's the difference to me. So you're not dealing with one zone at a time. This zone could float, and where appropriate could supplant the existing zoning. Some communities, mainly in Massachusetts, won't even approve a development unless it's got a number of affordable housing units within it. So if a developer wants to build high-end housing, many communities won't even approve it unless you have a certain number of affordable units within it. Camden doesn't have that issue. I think it just desperately needs housing anyway. But that's been Jeremy. If Jeremy wants to opine and is appropriate, I'm fine to listen to him too.
Okay, well, Jeremy is thinking about that. I think Joe Curl, you can't get your chat going. You want to ask a question?
I wondered what towns or communities in Maine have this overlay zone, and what would be a good one to look at?
None that I know.
Yeah.
I can get information on the overlay zone that we've used out of state, but none that I know of.
Bob Baldwin has his hand up. You're muted, Bob. There you go.
Yes, Joe, I'm sure there are other communities, lots of other communities like ours, maybe Bar Harbor, Wiscasset, whatever, that have similar problems. And I'm wondering if our coalition, if we set up a coalition, couldn't include some contact with some of these other communities so that we could get some ideas from them. And I'm also wondering if, you know, if our project wasn't huge, but rather modest in size, if you couldn't get some economies of scale by maybe teaming up with the other community and saying, well, let's try to use the same planners, the same architects, the same contractors, and instead of contracting for 10 houses, you're contracting for 30 houses. Has that been done, or would that help, or does that just complicate things?
Well, it could complicate things only because if you're going to do, I think that could help statewide with Augusta legislators as well as Main State Housing Authority. But zoning is town specific. So we could talk to other towns, as you suggest, because they have desperate housing problems. We got housing projects down in eastern Maine, tremendous problem. But zoning is town specific, so it has to go back to the town to get that overlay zone, and they're approved. That's not there may be other ways of doing it too. The contract zone is another way to do it, but it's laborious and it deals with only one project, whereas an overlay zone could be supplanted in any area of the town where engineering wise it is appropriate.
Okay, Joe, let's see. We are sort of getting some, we're out of time now, but
Okay.
will you stick around after 1 o'clock and a few others want to, Rodney, I know has a question, and we stick around and ask
Sure.
answer a few more questions? Okay, and just in Jeremy can't, his mic isn't working, but he said he's not aware of any contract or overlay zones in Maine. So that's something we can talk about after 1 o'clock. So thanks, Joe, very much. Chris, back to you.
I think, Rich, do you want to just open it up, or are there some questions?
Yeah, I think we'll just sit here and see. No, we still have 35 people though. So let's.
Rodney has a question.
Yeah, Rodney had a question.
Yes, Joe, in your financing, have you used tax increment financing, and have you used the community development block grant program, both in terms of the small cities and the entitlement cities?
Absolutely. Every time we can. CDBG is a big piece. We're doing a major project right now over in Lisbon Falls using CDBG. We use TIFs every time we can. It's a great vehicle where you basically, if you've got a new project and it's going to generate $1 million in taxes, leverage that up front to help dampen the cost of the project because you're going to get the housing. Yeah, great tools. We use them every time we can. Thank you.
Let's see. Stephanie had on Community Land Trust, there is a network of them in Maine, MDI, Hancock County, Portland. Anyone interested in learning more about Community Land Trust can contact me, Stephanie Smith S at me.com, Stephanie Smiths at me.com. And let's see, there was another thing about Mary Jane West from Mid-Coast Economic Development District, Council of Governments. We have 2 Zoom discussions tomorrow at 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. with 3 nonprofit developers. Our last discussion will be about what communities can do. I would love to work with Joe about presenting an overlay zone. Thank you much, Joe. That's Mary Jane West of Mid-Coast Economic Development District, Council of Governments.
And Joe, just to show you the impact of your conversation from Susan to Chris and Rich Anderson, let's get started on forming this coalition.
Let's go.
Anyone else?
Rich, I think you'd be the great person to put this together. You're so plugged into the community and you have so much energy and drive and you're smart. I can't think of a better person to do it. I don't know what it's going to take to get a decision from our board to authorize you on behalf of the Rotary Club if you think that's appropriate, but I think it would be a great idea. We've got so many community resources and we represent so many aspects of the community in this organization. I think it would be a great idea if we would take this on.
I'm not in the Rotary, but I'd second that.
Well, you
You
could
should
be in our
join.
club.
You should join.
Roger, you had your hand up. You're muted, Roger.
There you go.
Having audio problems earlier, Joe, so I missed some of your conversation, but how does water and sewer fit into your ideas about higher densities? I wonder sometimes if, thinking of local communities, if they extended sewers and water service to areas that would be create appropriate areas for high densities, wouldn't that ease some of the construction issues?
Absolutely, absolutely it would. Every time you want water and sewer to project. I've got projects that don't have municipal water and sewer, and it just, if you're an apartment project with a water supply, you're in effect a municipal water supply. And but always want water and sewer delivered to the site if we can possibly get it. Absolutely. And many times when you're dealing with ledge, that's very, very expensive, but it's worth it overall. And you want the town to participate in the cost of doing that.
Yeah, in that regard, Joe, and do you have experience where a town will step forward and sort of appeal to the residents to support an extension of a sewer to be able to achieve this project?
Oh, sure. Once the project, yeah, sure, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you have to get by the neighborhood, and you have to solve that problem if they're totally opposed. But they don't usually get opposed, Rich, on the basis of extending sewer and water. They basically, the NIMBYs and the NOPEs just don't want you there. That's all. Just don't want you there.
Joe, is the neighborhood problem, would having something that has a development that has a greater mix in it, that say would go from 80% to 120% of median house pricing, would that help the neighborhood problem? Or is the neighborhood just the amount of traffic?
Sometimes, but in general, the opposition has been to the housing in general. Like in Bath, we've got workforce home ownership, and they just didn't want to see that kind of density next to them anyway. So, but yes, I mean, the diversity is important, and you always want to try to get that if you can. In building apartments, though, you really can't mix the units because you need tax credits, and there are limits on those tax credits. So you'd have to adhere to the tax credits criteria, and that's the affordability piece. But in home ownership, yeah, you can diversify, build different income levels, and that's really the way to do it.
Barry?
Yes, Joe. What are the opportunities for building in smaller surrounding districts rather than the towns?
I didn't hear that.
What are the opportunities for building in smaller communities, places like Lincolnville or Northport or surrounding communities?
Oh, there's definitely opportunities in those communities. The challenge you've got is most likely sewer and water don't go very far. So that's the first impediment. And you can do on-site sewer and you can do on-site water, but it adds costs and it adds complexity to the not only the project, but the management. Home ownership, individual septic systems can be done. Wells can be done, but again, it just adds complexity. You want to build close to the infrastructure as you can. That's environmentally the best way to do it.
Bob, Baldwin?
Joe, how much could one save by going with a high quality modular builder versus a regular contractor?
Probably 15, 20%,
So that's
probably 15 to 20.
pretty significant savings, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, our savings on our performers for these homes that we've designed was significant. But again, if you're building one house, it's different scale than if you're building 20.
Yeah. Now,
With any.
the high quality modular home, in terms of its appearance, is it obvious that it's a modular home, or are the quality ones such that most people would not notice?
You'd never know the difference. When we were in the modular housing business years and years ago, we built a cottage for Harold Alfond from Dexter Shoe.
Mhm.
I mean, the thing cost $500,000 or $700,000 20 years ago. So you design it, have an architect design what you want, have your own specifications, go to the modular building company, and have them build it. If I were going to build a cottage, a very high-end cottage, I'd go modular today.
Mhm.
Not just because of the price, but because of the timing. All the contractors here in the mid-coast are so busy. It's not only the mid-coast, but almost anywhere. They're just so busy. It's very difficult to get anything done.
Okay, any other questions from anyone?
I've seen any
No?
hands raised. Joe, I want to thank you very, very much. It's fascinating talk on the possibilities and challenges that you face with your different projects around the state. So, and thank you again for staying late to answer the questions.
My pleasure. And Rich is a close friend, and I'm going to be having coffee with him. If he's been successfully drafted to head this up, I'll talk to him.
Sounds great. All right. Thanks again for all you folks who joined us, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.